Hello there and Happy New Year. Dr. Neptune here. And it's towards the end of January 2021. It's been over 2 months since I last posted a video of my collection. I was just very busy at the end of the year with work, and then also got a little sick, not from COVID, still COVID free. And then, also I was waiting for a new phone, which this is being shot on. It's a Pixel 5, so interested to see if this looks any better or different than any of my other stuff. So anyway, back to the show and tell, and I only think I have a few more videos left to show what's left of my collection that I haven't already. But I'm thinking of other things, and if anyone has suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. What I'm talking about today is the Rolling Stones, and this is their greatest hits collection called Hot Rocks. Sort of the essential greatest hits Rolling Stones collection. This originally came out as a double LP, and I remember my sister having that album, and this was really one of the first albums, the first groups that I ever knew and loved. I was just overwhelmed by the Rolling Stones as a kid. I couldn't believe that the same group that would do a song like Get Off My Cloud would be the same group that did a song like Ruby Tuesday or As Tears Go By. And then towards the end of this collection, which would have been the second LP, I think probably starting with Jumping Jack Flash, even my very young ears, I could tell that was a huge leap forward in terms of their creativity and sound and artistry. Not that their early work wasn't great, but in the late 60s, starting with about the Beggars Banquet album, I think, is when they really became the Stones that they ended up staying for the next good 15 or so years. And in fact, this is my favorite era of the Stones, these CDs that I'm going to show you, from the late 60s to about the mid 80s. I also remember as a kid being really fascinated by this. This was on the back of the album. And I knew that these guys were a modern group, but this picture of them in medieval gear out around this ruined castle sort of blew my mind a little bit, and I've always kind of loved the way it looks. Even Charlie's stern expression there is all part of the mystique. So this was Hot Rocks 64 to 71, and it's as good a compilation of the Stones' first 7 years, I think, as you'll find, and much loved. There was a sequel to Hot Rocks called More Hot Rocks, Big Hits and Phased Cookies, and this also has material from the same time period. Some of these are less known songs, although if you're looking at this, there's a lot that you do know. Emphasis is a little more on the psychedelic sound. Songs like 2,000 Light Years from Home and She's a Rainbow, Child of the Moon, those 3 in a row. We Love You, kind of mixed in with their other things here. Some old covers from very early in their career, and some kind of strange odds and ends. I think that this was meant as some sort of tribute to Brian Jones, the deceased member at that time. Maybe these songs had his stamp on them. I'm not really sure, but just from this inner cover here, I was talking about Sweet Innocent Brian. Of course, knowing the Stones, they could have been sarcastic. But here they are in their mid-60s glory. It's Brian Jones on the end. And a little fold out of this. I'm looking for the date of this compilation. I'm not seeing it. It's a great picture. Stones in Wild Man gear. this kind of negative after image of the band. I'm guessing this must have come out not long after the original Hot Rocks. Okay, and then around the same time, in the late 60s, the Stones did this rock and roll circus. It was meant to be a TV show. It was filmed, and parts of it were released, but a lot of it wasn't. I believe it's the Who's performance of a quick one. That filmed performance from this event appeared on the Who's Kids Are All Right album and film, and it's amazing. The legend is, I think that Mick Jagger wasn't happy with the Stones' performance or with his performance, so it wasn't released. But this is from '95, years after the fact, a CD. And I'm not sure if this is the whole show, but it's got a lot of Stones at the end here. And there were other artists too, besides them and the Who. Jethro Tull, you see there, Marianne Faithfull. Yoko Ono's on this too. And her song is difficult to listen to, as a lot of hers was. Big props to Yoko for being an experimental artist, but in terms of music, not really my first or 100th choice to listen to. But this is an interesting artifact of the time, and most of the music on here is really good, including the Stones' performance. So I don't really know what the problem was, but it says 2 days in December 1968 was the filming of this. And then there's this booklet with historical background and whatnot. There's Mick and Keith. Okay. Then came Beggars Banquet. This is the original cover. The album also exists in versions with just kind of a very plain cover with the name of the group and the album in script. This is the original toilet cover. Even some graffiti here, Bob Dylan's Dream. That's a Bob Dylan song, but the arrow points to the handle on the toilet there. I remember clearly seeing this graffiti as a kid in school. They blurred out the end of it, but it's "Here I sit, broken-hearted, came to shit and only farted." Even an obscene cartoon there. I don't know what was up with that cover, but this is one of the greatest albums of all time, certainly one of their greatest albums, and I think the beginning of their imperial period. They're just the time when you could really call them the greatest rock and roll band, name that they gave to themselves long ago. But it's hard to argue with their output in all the music that I'm going to show you here. So Beggars Banquet, this was, as I said earlier, a new direction from their sound from the early and mid-'60s. A lot of blues stuff here. American blues music, always important to the Stones, but it came more and more to the forefront, especially in these first few albums that I'll show. And most of these songs are well known by even non-Stones fans. So Beggars Banquet, I believe the year on that was 68. Their next album was Let It Bleed, which is also one of their greatest albums, but I don't have it. I used to on CD, and like so much of the rest of my collection, it somehow has gone missing, but that's the one with You Can't Always Get What You Want, and let's see, what else is on there? Midnight Rambler, bunch of great stuff. Of course, all these are available on all streaming services. But I do have this. This is a box set reissue of a live album called Get Your Yaas Out. This came out in '69. And these songs come from mainly from Beggars Banquet and Let It Bleed, a couple ones from earlier in their career. But this was a concert at Madison Square Garden. And then there is a support act, a couple of them here, which are legendary, B.B. King and Ike and Tina Turner. So this reissued, expanded edition of Get Your Yaas Out includes this music, which wasn't on the original. And then there's even a DVD here of these Stones songs. I believe this was an acoustic set. Really interesting time capsule from that era. And here's some of the extras of the box set. Here's the CD. This is Charlie Watts, the drummer. It's a very funny video of this photo shoot where it was a miserable cold day. This was out on the motorway, which is a British version of a freeway, I guess. And just everyone's in coats. It's drizzly, cloudy. Charlie looks and acts miserable. Mick is there kind of directing everything, but he's in his big old fur coat. He's comfortable. And so we've got 4 discs here with the music and the DVDs, and behind the discs, I'm not going to take them out, but that's the crowd at Madison Square Garden. I guess that's the stage. And some other extras. This was the poster. They would print the city and other information here, to advertise the concert, but this is a reproduction of that. Very late 60s vibe in that imagery. And then a little booklet here explaining what's going on. It's a very cool picture. So by this time, Brian Jones had died. This is Mick Taylor, who is his replacement, and he was with the Stones for a few albums during this time. Never really gelled with the rest of the band personality-wise. It's always been my understanding of it. So he left in the mid-70s and was replaced by Ron Wood, who's in the band to this day. And this, of course, is Bill Wyman, the original bass player. He left the group as of this recording. It was some years ago. And Charlie, the drummer, and of course, Keith and Mick, still in the group, still getting it done. There's Mick in full prancing mode. Oh, that's Tina Turner, B.B. King. Mick and BB. It's really great. Oh, there's Chuck Berry. As I said, great time capsule of this. And this is hey, Jimi Hendrix was backstage. So this is a big event. Stones playing Madison Square Garden. Here's some of the crowd. This album was really famous for a couple of exchanges with the crowd. One is where Mick says something about his trousers becoming undone. It must be these ones that he's wearing here. He says in this very teasing voice to the audience, he says something like, my buttons are falling off. You don't want my trousers to fall down now, do you? And of course, everybody screams, yeah, they do. And at another moment, there's a girl, must be right up front, close to the stage. She sounds drunk or high, but she's screaming out. She wants him to play, I think it's Paint It Black. But the way she says it is, she says, paint it black, you devils. It's very clear on the soundtrack. And I think that's it for this set, yes. So that was Get Your Yaas Out. Stones are great live. I've never seen them, but I have several recordings, and they usually don't disappoint in terms of their live show. All right, next up in line chronologically is what some consider their very best. For me, the jury's a little out on that, but it's definitely one of them. Exile on Main Street. And this is the original album, the original artwork too. So the big hits on this one would have been Tumbling Dice Happy was a fairly big hit. But all these are amazing and really, really steeped in American blues and R&B music. They were really hitting their stride here, I think. This was the original album, and then there's a reissue here. Has some extra songs, and these extra songs on the reissue are kind of questionable. It's always been a little mysterious about to what extent these songs might have been recorded at the time, or parts of them were recorded and then re-recorded. The band has been kind of cagey about the provenance of these songs. Most of them are pretty good, but the original album, of course, is the one to pay attention to. And this one came out in, I think it was 1971. Let's see if there's a date on the original. 72, yeah. Okay, so Exile on Main Street, and then this is, I guess this is the disc, interview disc, it says. Usually I don't find interviews, either recorded or written, to be that interesting with rock stars. I prefer to just listen to the music. And runner-up, I think, for Stones, the best Stones album was this one, the one that immediately followed Exile on Main Street. It's called Sticky Fingers. This one with Brown Sugar, Wild Horses, Bitch. Biggest hits on that. Date on this one, 70, it says all 71. Not sure if these dates are exactly accurate, but there they are in their early 70s glory. I don't know who the model was for this underpants shot, but this is one of the most iconic, most famous album covers of all time. And you saw it in there, Andy Warhol had a hand in designing it. And for this one, I actually have a copy of the album. I don't know where this came from, quite frankly. It's not mine. I never had this as an LP. Might have gotten it at a garage sale, or just somebody dug it up in a basement somewhere. But it's in very poor condition. But it just shows you the album. And the key highlight of this album cover is that there's a functional zipper. So, for what it's worth, this album is all torn up, but the zipper still works, and you can see a large version of the underpants. That's the imprint of the zipper. That's how worn this album is, but I keep it anyways as an artifact. Here's the album itself. It's you can see completely wrecked, scratched up, dusty. Whoever owned this played it a lot, it looks like. So, Sticky Fingers. All right, their next studio album was called Goat's Head Soup from 1973. This album was recorded in Jamaica, but has zero Jamaican influence on it, which is odd, to say the least. A recent interview that I did read with Mick Jagger about this album, it was recently reissued, as most of these albums have been. But he said that that was a conscious choice. They didn't want to go to Jamaica and make a reggae album. So they didn't. But the Stones do have a lot of great reggae songs, or reggae-influenced songs, just not on this one. So this one is best known probably for Angie. They're all great songs, though. I think this is an underrated album in many ways. Perhaps because of the kind of weird cover, I don't know. But definitely worth checking out. A few ballads towards the end. Winter is a beautiful one. 100 Years Ago, another one. Coming Down Again. Star Star, for the purpose of this CD cover and album covers of the day. This is a censored version of this song title. The song's title is Star Fucker. And it's one of the most vulgar songs the Stones have ever done. Star Fucker, Star Fucker. So, yeah. Stones in full decadent mode through these years. That's Goat's Head Soup. Next up, It's Only Rock and Roll, with this crazy cover of the Stones, I guess, having ascended into heaven or some such location. I think the artist who did this cover was famous in the 70s for doing a lot of pictures like this. There's a famous poster that was in people's dorm rooms and stuff called Rock and Roll Heaven, I think, and had, all the dead rock stars, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, etc., all together in some kind of idealized setting. But It's Only Rock and Roll from, I keep having to check the years, I'm going to say 73 or 74 maybe. I love this album right from the start. That first song, If You Can't Rock Me, it's a rock. It's a rocker. Ain't Too Proud to Beg is a cover of the old Motown song. Of course, the title track, known by everyone. Dance Little Sister was also a big hit for this from this one. Short and Curly's continuing their vulgar references. But boys will be boys was the attitude in those days. Here's some of the supporting players. Billy Preston played on a lot of Stones albums in this time. Great piano player and horn player. Nicky Hopkins, keyboardist. Ian Stewart, also another keyboard player with the band for a long, long time until his passing. Must have been 10, 15-ish years ago from this recording. And a couple other musicians there too. It's Only Rock and Roll, but I like it. Followed by Black and Blue. Great album from 1976. Here's where they just started to be influenced or show an influence of the burgeoning disco scene, specifically with Hot Stuff. It's not the same as the Donna Summer song, Hot Stuff, but it is a kind of quasi-Stones disco song, and looks forward to Miss You, which appears on the following album. Hand of Fate is a fantastic deep cut. If you don't know it, you should listen to it if you are interested in the Stones. Cherry O Baby is a cover of a reggae song. Speaking of reggae, UB40 most memorably covered it on their Labor of Love album. And a few really tender ballads too, like Memory Motel. Melody Fool to Cry is just, again, one of the all-time best Stones ballads. Mick sings most of it in falsetto. Has a similar vibe in my mind to Waiting on a Friend from Tattoo You later on. And Crazy Mama closing off with another great driving rock tune. And this was the first album that Ron Wood appeared on. So like I said, there's Ronnie, used to play with Rod Stewart's band and many others. And so he was Mick Taylor's replacement. Here you can see even their styling is very 70s looking. Okay, so Black and Blue. Here's the whole fold out. Ad campaign for this album featured a beautiful model with a black eye. Those were different times. Aroused a little bit of controversy, but really not all that much, and certainly not, I don't think anyone would even try to do that nowadays, unless they're deliberately trying to be offended or to cause offense, which the Stones were doing too. Black and Blue is a great album. And then here's Some Girls, all-time classic, starting off with Miss You, that disco song. A great punk-influenced song called When the Whip Comes Down. Beautiful cover of Imagination, another Motown song. Some Girls, offensive, but a great vibe. Lies, a fast song. Faraway Eyes, a parody of a country song. Respectable, and Before They Make Me Run. Other also punk kind of influence, just in their tempo. Beast of Burden, One of a Kind, and then Shattered also. Mick rapping at the end. This was the first Stones album that I was aware of when it came out, so it's dated, I think, 78. Yes, 78. And when it came out on the radio, FM radio, you know, the DJs, here's a new Stones album, and I knew the Stones, and I thought, cool, what's this about? And I actually bought the singles for Miss You and Beast of Burden. I have 45 RPM 7-inch singles in my collection. I showed them in my 7-inch single collection. Didn't dig them up for this, but Some Girls, yeah, all-time classic, not just of the Stones, but of any rock band. Followed up by Tattoo You, which was a huge hit. Start Me Up, of course, from there. Neighbors, I always loved. Waiting on a Friend, like I mentioned, is in there too. Some of these songs were, in fact, I think all of these songs were either already recorded and not released, or partially recorded and then finished for this album. Some of them dating all the way back to the Exile and Main Street era. I'm not sure which ones, but you could look it up if you were so interested. Minimal packaging here. There's Tattoo You. And then in when was this? I don't know. This is 1980? Can that be right? I'm not sure. Anyway, Emotional Rescue is the next one. And this was the first album, or this is the first Stones album of this long stretch where I really feel like you can sort of see the beginning of, not the end, because they continue to release albums, but I don't know, a creeping in of kind of like a sameness, or a less, I don't know how to even say it. Not as good as the stuff that I showed you, I guess. So there's a song like Summer Romance, or Indian Girl, Where the Boys Go, where it really just kind of sounds like they might be going through the motions a little bit. It also starts to sound a little weird because even though these guys were, let's see, if this was early 80s, they were probably just barely 40, but they're still singing about teenage love, teenage lust. So some of that doesn't really work as well as it could. Having said that, though, some of these songs are great. Dance Part 1 is great. And Emotional Rescue, the title track, and She's So Cold. Definitely worthy additions to the Stones canon. And then my last CD that I have from this era is Undercover. Again, I think kind of an underrated CD or album by the Stones. I loved it when it came out and now. It's got a harsher sound in a lot of the songs than what they did before. These are all too much. Actually, all of them. Yeah, I don't see a single one here that I don't like. Too Much Blood, a comedy horror song, in part about chainsaw murderers. Really fantastic. And the original album, when it came out, had stickers, I think, and you could peel off these stickers. I'm not sure what you saw underneath, but famous Stones logo there, of course. So that was, still not sure of the year here, 83-ish maybe. And then they continued to release albums like Steel Wheels and several others up to the present time. And I've heard all of them. Most of them have maybe one or two good songs, maybe more. But in my mind, this was the greatest era of the Stones. I do have this, which is a 12-inch single from 1985 of Mick Jagger and David Bowie doing a cover of the old Martha and the Vandellas song Dancing with the Street. Also had been recently covered by Van Halen on their Diver Down album. This image is from the video. This song was widely panned at the time. People didn't like it. I don't know. I really don't know why. I thought it was great. I did then. I do now. And it's a lot of fun to see these two legends in 1985. You know, they still had a lot ahead of them in terms of their careers. But it's just a fun moment in time. And I mentioned with Get Your Yaas Out, the Stones have a lot of other live albums. That's the only one I have in my collection, but all of them are worth listening to. And this is a film on Blu-ray, which I originally saw when it came out in IMAX. And directed, as you see, by Martin Scorsese. He's directed a lot of great rock films and concert films, like The Last Waltz. This is Shine a Light. This is a show, I think, in New York City. It's really beautifully filmed. So here's the four remaining original members. Bill Wyman had left, had retired by this time. And the year on this is 2008. So the rest of the band is made up of guest stars and session players. Here you can see Jack White with the red guitar. And this film actually shocked me when I first saw it. I mean, I went into it loving the Stones and having loved all that music that I just showed you for the last half hour. But I couldn't believe the vibrancy and the dynamism of their performance, especially Mick. Just performed like a man half his age or less. Looked great, sounded great. Christina Aguilera is on this, and she comes out and does an amazing version of Live With Me. Is that her? Yeah, that's her. Live With Me from the Let It Bleed album. So, highly recommend this concert film. It's one of the best. And then the last artifacts that I have to show are books. I have a small collection a small library of Rolling Stones books. This is called Exile on Main Street, A Season in Hell with the Rolling Stones. Interesting, although somewhat gossipy book about the recording of that classic album. They recorded most of it in the south of France at an old chateau bought by Keith Richards. And it was kind of a hangout and party place, and a lot of crazy stuff went on there, a lot of legends and myths from this time. To the extent that any of them are true, who really knows or remembers. But it really adds to the mystique it always has. The recording of this album has added to the mystique of the songs. The songs almost sound like they're from another era, almost otherworldly in some ways. And so the craziness and rock star lifestyle that these guys were engaging in, not to mention all the partying and drugs, was a big part of this whole scene. Okay. And then there's Keith Richards' famous autobiography just called Life. Keith Richards, one of the classic rock and roll characters. And this book is entirely, obviously written by Keith. It's totally in his voice. You can imagine him sitting down, having a drink and a smoke, and talking about the same things that he writes about in the book here. book has the famous anecdote where Keith says that after his own father had passed away, and the father was cremated, Keith, in some kind of ritualistic tribute fashion, smoked a little bit of his father's ashes. Again, if he's who knows if he's telling the truth about that or not, but it doesn't really matter. Legend is part of the whole Stones story. And then finally, I have this big coffee table book, according to the Rolling Stones. This is a really nicely put together book, obviously authorized by the group. Show a little bit of it here. Tons of pictures, tons of stories, a discography. Interviews from the band and others who were there. It's a fun book to flip through, just to look at the pictures, if for nothing else. There's the Stones boarding their famous chartered jet, 1972, their personalized airliner. All right, so sorry for the shaking. That concludes my discussion of the Rolling Stones. Thank you for watching. Sorry for the long delay in posting, but I have a few more that are going to be coming soon of other parts of my collection. And this has been Dr. Neptune, and I will be back soon.